Welcome. We're absolutely delighted to have you here with us today. My name is Josephine McMurray, and I'm the Associate Director of AgeWell. I'm very glad to see so many of you joining us and to come and learn a little bit more about technology-based solutions that can support people with cognitive decline. As an aside, we're also going to touch a little bit on the role that technology can play in assessing and promoting cognitive health. As we all know, this is an extremely important topic for Canadians, but equally important to our AgeWell network. Cognitive health and dementia is one of our 8 challenge areas, critically important and a very complex problem that faces many older adults and their caregivers. And so AgeWell is using our challenge areas to drive research and innovation and solutions to that end. So I'm thrilled to say we're seeing some very exciting innovations emerging from AgeWell driven research, and just by the efforts of a number of experts in the domain. Our distinguished guests today are part of that group of experts, and we're going to be speaking with them very shortly. Before we do, I'd like to acknowledge that although we're meeting virtually today, we operate on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations, which have cared for the land for thousands of years, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This land remains home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty, which is an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work on this land today. You may not live here. You may live and work in different territories, so we encourage you to reflect on the land on which you're located and to consider your relationship with that land and to the people who are the traditional keepers of the land. Thank you. So before we kick things off and we meet our guests, I'd like to take a few minutes to share a little bit of information about AgeWell, particularly for those who are joining us in this AgeWell session today for the very first time. AgeWell is Canada's technology and aging network. And our vision is that Canada's leadership in technology and aging, sometimes called AgeTech, benefits the world. Our mission is to develop a community of researchers, older adults, caregivers, partners, and future leaders that accelerates the development of technology-based solutions that make a meaningful difference in the lives of Canadians. Over the past almost decade, that support has helped to build an incredible network and outstanding results. We have over 300 researchers at 50 universities and research centers in Canada, over 1,300 trainees, 60 plus Canadian age tech startups, over 180 technologies, services, policies, and practices that are either in development or actually on the market or in institutions being used. We have 4, and can say this very proudly, 4 national innovation hubs, and crucially, the purposeful involvement of over 5,000 older adults and caregivers, many of whom we are welcoming on the call today. So now I know we're all eager to hear more about cognitive health and dementia, so let's turn things over to our panel. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. If you have any questions or comments while you're listening, please go ahead and type them into the chat box. So that is the little bubble at the bottom of the screen, where that's sort of shaped like a little speech bubble. You can click on that and then type in your question. If you prefer to ask a question orally, there should be some time as well at the end to do so. Finally, just a note that we'll be recording today's session. In fact, we've started recording now, so it will be available for you to watch on our YouTube channel. And we welcome your sharing those links with your friends and others who might be interested. So with no further ado, let's introduce our panel. First up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Frank Knoefel, who leads AgeWell's Cognitive Health and Dementia Challenge Area. Frank, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your research fits in today's topic of harnessing the power of technology for people living with cognitive decline?
Thanks, Josephine. So yeah, so I'm part of the SAM3 National Innovation Hub from AgeWell, and we thank AgeWell for all the support for that work. I'm a physician in care of the elderly, and I've been caring for older Canadians for 30 years now. And I've been doing research in technology and aging for about 20 years of that. My clinical work right now is at the Rare Memory Program, so a specialized academic memory clinic, and so for the last 20 years, I've been doing exclusively caring for older people with cognitive decline. And of course, my research on technology is all related to cognitive decline now, both in the space of smart homes, but also in driving.
Thanks so much, Frank. What an amazing career of service you've had. That's incredible. Next up, Mr. Jay Reinstein. Jay, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'll be touching on in today's discussion.
Sure. Again, my name is Jay Reinstein. I am living in Durham, North Carolina, so not in Canada, but I love Canada. I'm 62, and at 58, I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease after a career of 30 years in local government. Since my diagnosis, I have advocated on the national level and serve on several boards. But today, I'll give you a little bit about my journey, but I'll talk about how I'm using technology and how some technology advances are going to be coming up that will help others living with early onset dementia. And I must say that I love Nanaimo bars and butter tarts.
True Canadian at heart. Jay, thanks so much. Really looking forward to hearing about some of your practical experience. Next, we have Dr. Arlene Astell. Arlene, tell us a little about yourself and what you'll be sharing with us today.
Hi, thank you, Josephine. I'm Dr. Arlene Astell, and I'm the director of the Dementia Aging Technology Engagement Lab in Toronto, which I set up a few years ago to really be a home for research using technologies that either currently exist or that we can leverage existing functions. And in doing that work, we do a lot of implementation practice and looking at how we can get things actually into people's hands. So today I'm going to be talking about 3 projects that we've been working on recently and the impact that they're having in Canada.
Thanks, Arlene. That last mile into people's homes and into use is so important, isn't it? Finally, we have Dr. Bryan Hong. He's joining to join us in our panel discussion. Bryan, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to be doing today.
For sure. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. My name is Dr. Bryan Hong. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Toronto in the Department of Psychology. I'm working with Dr. Morgan Bren, studying how our memory systems work, how our brains can support memory. And as part of that work, we were working on applying some of the memory strategies that we know from cognitive psychology and neuroscience to help create a smartphone tool to help mitigate age-related memory loss. So as part of that, we were able to form a little company where I serve as the co-founder and chief science and product officer as well. At AgeWell, I also serve as president of the HQP advisory committee. So I get the privilege to work with all the amazing trainees across Canada as well in the AgeTech space.
Bryan, I feel tired just listening to everything that you're doing. It's an incredibly full schedule. So thank you. Okay, so we're right on track here. Let's start our discussion. So Jay, why don't you lead us off and tell us a little about your work?
Yeah, so once I got my diagnosis, it really was a punch in the gut because I had been working for 30 years full time and started having issues with processing information, my short-term memory retention. And once I got my official diagnosis, my career ended. And my new career began in advocacy. And I thought that it was really important to do everything I could to educate folks about the disease, to raise awareness, and most importantly for me was to reduce the stigma, that you can still live life, in my opinion, well with this disease, at least early on. And getting involved in some of these boards has opened some real doors. And I'll talk about how I've used technology and some of the exciting stuff I'm doing with the, I think it's called the Longitude Prize on Dementia, which AgeWell is a partner on. So what I have done, at least in the last few years, is I use my iPhone calendar is really my Bible. I have to depend on my iPhone calendar, which I color code. So I know what are my work related meetings and my personal stuff. So everything is color coded. I use voice texts because I'm having more difficulty using my hands writing. So I voice text and I also voice email. I have an Alexa in the house, and the Alexa helps me with my medications, which if it wasn't for Alexa, my wife would drive me crazy reminding me to do a million things during the day. But it really does help between my medications, when I need to make sure that I, do my laundry, and just appointments that I have. So I'm trying to use my iPhone. I use the Alexa, and I also use a lot of Post-it notes, which is not really technology, but again, they're reminders. But what's really become very exciting for me is that I was asked about a year ago to participate on this Longitude Prize on Dementia. And they have a panel, and it's comprised of 6 individuals living with early onset Alzheimer's and 6 caregivers. And it's part of the Lived Experience Advisory Panel, which we call LEAP. And I was so excited because I had a voice at the table. I'm actually reviewing submissions from companies from all over the world, including several from Canada. And these technologies, many are using artificial intelligence that can really impact how we live our lives. And some of the stuff is so transformative, way over my head. But most importantly, we are looking at these submissions and they're listening to us. We share what makes sense to us, what doesn't make sense to us, and we ask a lot of questions. We get to meet with these companies. There are 24 companies now from around the world that have submitted technology. And we're going to get it down to the top 5, I believe, in July. And these 5 winners will each, I think, get $300,000. And then the winner, which we'll select in 2025, will get $1 million. But for me to be involved in something where we're looking at these new technologies and that really can improve our just our way of living. And I'm really excited. So what I wanted to tell you is there are a couple that really just jumped out at me. And I wanted to share 2 from Toronto, actually. One is called KITE. It's the Toronto Rehab Institute. And it's a preventative AI-based digital health system that can detect and respond to risky behaviors, limiting the chance of injuries for those living with dementia. I mean, that's huge. And then the other one is the University of Toronto, a machine learning and artificial intelligence device that flags when someone has lost track of a task through behavioral and physiological indicators, then provides the relevant cues to get them back on track. How cool is this stuff? And some of this stuff I don't really understand, but we will pass on our input to these judges from around the world. And these judges are going to make this decision, and that really can positively impact people from all over the world. So it's very exciting stuff. And, I just wanted to say that when you're an advocate for people living with this disease, and you actually have a place on a spot at the table and a voice at the table where people are listening and taking us seriously, it makes all the difference in the world. And I'm just so honored to have these opportunities to speak with you all today, to serve on these boards, to talk to people, and most importantly, let people know while I may not be able to do everything I could do 5 years ago, I can still do things, but with the help and assistance of technology, boy, I can maybe do things that I'm not able to do and that can help me over the next few years. So again, technology is huge. I really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to some Q&A in a little bit. So thank you.
Dave, that was really terrific. Thank you. And I think what it really pointed out is that people have systems in place everywhere, from low tech types of systems, your wife Post-its, right through to this amazing new tech that's coming out that's using machine learning, sophisticated AI algorithms for good. We're hearing so much about the things that are the potential for this to be used for bad. So to hear that you're getting lots of new innovations coming through in that longitudinal prize for good, that's fantastic. And we'll come back to that later, I'm sure. So next up, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Frank Knoefel. So if you'd like to take it away, Frank.
Thanks, Josephine, and thanks, Jay, for sort of setting the tone for this meeting. First, I want to acknowledge that I am part of a team, so everything I'm talking about is part of the work we've been doing. Jay talked a little bit about technology that he's using at home and how it cues him. So I'm going to continue sort of on that vein, and we're talking about aging in place and technology, but with cognitive decline, one of the things that can happen is that our activities of daily living can become impaired. And so, family members and physicians and clinicians all are concerned that the person living with cognitive decline is still able to function well and age well at home. So before I start talking about the technology, I just want us to think about sort of the sequence of things that happen in human brains in day-to-day activities. So imagine you're watching television and you smell something. And so the first thing is, of course, the chemicals hit your nose, and then from there, a message gets sent to the brain. So there's a smell. So then the brain goes, have I ever smelled anything like this before? I might go to the memory center and check through and the catalog, and sure enough, I've smelled something like this before, and it's kind of a burning smell. So then the brain goes, I wonder what that could be. Is there anything I've done recently that could cause burning? Oh yeah, I put down some toast a few minutes ago. So then it goes, oh, toast, the smell, yeah, that could be associated. So now I need to do an action. So the brain says, get up off the sofa, head over and unplug the toaster. So all of these processes, a smart home and smart home technology would want to replicate. So the components of a smart home then need to start with these front-end sensors. So the types of sensors you can have in the home are motion sensors, like in a normal alarm system you might have at home. You might have temperature and humidity sensors. There'll be door sensors, so you can tell if something is open or closed. And there are fancier sensors like infrared technology sensors. So on this picture here, you can see a photo of what's going on in the kitchen, but the zooming in on the iPad is actually the frying pan. And you can see how the heat from the stove is starting to hit the frying pan, but there's a black spot in the middle of the frying pan. That's where the meat is, because the meat hasn't quite heated up yet. So it gives you an idea of how, an infrared camera can give us information about something that's going on in the kitchen. And then there's another sensor called an electronic nose, which could pick up smells, like the kind of thing you'd have in a fire alarm. So these sensors then might be in your home, but they need to be connected to a hub. They need to, that information needs to go somewhere. From the hub, it needs to go to a computer that can analyze this information. And that might be a hard computer, or it could be a cloud-based computer. And then an analysis needs to happen. And then an action needs to happen if something needs to be corrected. So let's go back to the kitchen now, and let's think about cooking potatoes, something that's relatively universal. And let's think about how sensors might be able to help us with this task. So we will have motion sensors in this kitchen. We will have door sensors on cupboards and drawers. We will have the temperature sensor on the pipe leading to the sink. and we will have an infrared sensor looking at the stove like we just saw. So the first action is there's going to be motion in the kitchen. Someone is going to walk in and that'll trigger a wake up system. Something's about to happen. Let's say the next thing that happens is that the door sensor fires, saying that the cupboard where the potatoes are has been opened. And then the door will be closed. Presumably we've taken out the potatoes. Then the drawer sensor says, I'm opening, and that's where the knives and the peeling knife are. So we're getting that equipment. Then there might be some motion in the kitchen because we're peeling, we're cutting. Then the next thing that happens is another door sensor opens. This time we're taking out a pot. Then there's some motion in front of the stove. We're putting the pot on, and then we turn the heat on, and we see that, you know, the pot is starting to heat up. So all of this information goes to the hub in the home. All of that information then goes to a computer somewhere, and the computer is going motion check, drawers check, cupboard check, tap temperature change, no check. So now we're missing a step. No water has been added to this pot. This is a problem, and so we need an action. So to go back to Jay's example, right, if we could then send a message through the smart speaker in his home and say, Bob, did you want to add some water to the pot, right? Then Bob might be in the kitchen still and might go, yeah, of course, take the pot, bring it back to the sink, turn on the tap, cold water will go through the pipe, so the temperature will go from room temperature to cold, and the system will go, perfect, check. Water has been added, and that may be it. Because of course, the first person we always want to cue is the person living in the home. So that's the most important thing. But let's say that they don't do the corrective action. Then we may want to connect with someone else, a family member, saying, look, we're in the kitchen, we're cooking potatoes, but there's a risk of the pot catching on fire. And if we can't reach a family member, then we could escalate further to maybe a neighbor, home care, or ultimately we can connect to the fire detector, the smoke detector. And if there's really starting to burn, you know, there could be a call to 911. So it's just one example of one activity in the kitchen, but trying to give an idea of sort of the type of technology we're working on. I don't have time to talk about ethics and public policy. My time's up. So I do want to refer you back, though. Our team has just written a book on smart supportive homes. So there's the members of our team, some of the members, and of course we have lots of students, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. And don't worry, I'll come back to you with that ethics question. I'll come back to you with that ethics question. It struck me as you were talking how we're putting people, contemplating sending people to Mars, we're putting people into outer space, and yet we still are working on this incredibly complex problem, which is building smart homes that help people live more independently longer. So a really, really complex space that you're in, and we're so glad that you're in there working on it. To that end now, let's hear a little bit from Dr. Astell. She has talked to us before about the fact that she's looking at that last mile, about helping people to actually implement and use these technologies. Over to you, Arlene.
Great, thanks, Josephine. And thanks, AgeWell, for inviting me here to talk about some of the work we've been doing. So yeah, I've been asked to talk about the work that is actually two parts, really. One is the implementation and how we try to do that, but also it's really using technology that already exists for the main, and how we can make the most of that and bring those benefits to people living with dementia. So I'm going to tell you about 3 projects. And the first one is using tablets, which you'll be very familiar with. So we'll see just some images from one of our programs. This was from the Let's Connect project, which we ran in Ontario from 2016 to around 2020. And what you see here are some examples from this project. And what is interesting, it was very much an implementation project. These are just devices that you can purchase, and all of the games are just from the App Store or from the Google Play Store. And we actually have set up a website called Acto Dementia, which I'll put the link in after I finish speaking, where you can go and look for accessible touchscreen games. What's interesting, though, about the Let's Connect project was we worked with day programs and also some long-term care to see how they wanted to use tablets. So what you see here in the bottom image is a group session of people using tablets. And that might seem counterintuitive. People might think, oh, well, surely playing a game is something you do on your own. But most of the organizations we work with will do group activities. So it had to be done in that way. So we developed a training program where we would go in and train the staff and volunteers, and then we run a few sessions, and we hand over to them to run them, and we stay in the background. And at the end of the sort of few weeks that we come, we then support them if they don't have any devices for how to purchase them, how to set them up, how to get the apps that are accessible, and so on. And what you find is some people want to play on their own. You see a gentleman here who's playing a jigsaw game, somebody else playing a bubble game, and some people want to play with another client of the center, and some people want to play with a volunteer or staff member. We also looked at how to, once they were established using them, how people could use them at home if they were people still living at home. And we worked then with families to show them the devices their loved ones were using, and talk with them about how they could promote this once people go home. Now, you might think, well, why do we need to do this? These devices have been around for more than 10 years now, getting on 15. But when it comes to using them with people living with dementia, there's often a gap in knowledge of how to actually introduce them and what things would be beneficial. So we also have some support for this. We have a manual, and during the pandemic, we offered weekly sessions for people to come and learn how to use these. So that was the first thing, and that is still ongoing. The second one is involving a different type of technology, and hopefully we're going to get a little video clip. Fingers crossed. You might be surprised by this. Hopefully Megan can make this work. Hopefully with sound as well. I can't hear sound, but you have to make it up. Yeah, well, you can all cheer. I'll cheer. Everybody cheered. Normally we hear the sounds of the skittles falling. So I'm showing you that because that technology is an Xbox with a Kinect camera. We started using those also back in 2016. And unfortunately, that was the same year as Microsoft stopped bundling them together. They now provide an Xbox in a slightly different way. But however, we discovered you can get reconditioned ones. So we carried on regardless with the project. And this was also another implementation project in the sense that we went again to day programs, to some long-term care homes who wanted to do this. And we were doing this as a project where we were collecting data. We were actually doing some research to see how easily people could learn to use these technologies. But we also started a whole line of research about the potential impact of these devices for offering physical activity, and maybe even having some application to reducing some fall risks and encouraging, people to be active. So that's a whole line of research that we're doing in the lab. But what is interesting about this, the project, is again, many of the centers we work with were very excited by it, and we were very careful to schedule our sessions into their program. So we might be doing, Tuesday morning at 10 or Thursday afternoon at 2 or whatever. So that when we left, if they wanted, and the majority did, they wanted to keep this going because bowling is a really popular activity, even for people who've never done it before. So again, we helped them to set up the devices. We made sure that the staff were trained when we were there, and they were running the sessions by the end. Again, we also have manuals if people want to do this. But it was very much about this idea or counteracting the idea that researchers come along and they want to find out things for their benefit. So they parachute in a team, they get their stuff, their data, and then they go away, and nothing has changed in the environment. So we decided to switch that up so we can all win. We can get data, which we've published about people learning to do bowling, but the centres have also got a new activity, one that they really like, which most of them managed to keep going in some ways during the pandemic, started again straight after. And I think it also something to do with what Jay said about tackling stigma, because to me, when you see people living with dementia using everyday technologies that we all can use, like, Xbox, tablets, whatever it is, Alexas, that breaks down barriers, because then it also opens up opportunities. Hey, wow, we could do these other things. So that's why it's really important. The third thing I want to mention is something I'm really excited about, which is Circa. And Circa is very close to my heart because it was the first ever project that I got funding for back in 2001. So like Frank, I've been doing this sort of work for many, many years. And what you see here are the very first people to see these, some screenshots of the Canadian version of Circa. So Circa is a conversation support for people living with dementia, and it's on a touchscreen. These are 4 different screens here. So basically you see the screen in the lower right corner, which gives you choices. So you have choices of seeing videos, looking at photographs, listening to music clips, and then they are played in the appropriate way. So either you see TV shows on the Circa TV, or listen to radio shows, listen to music on the radio, and watch movie clips, short ones, in a movie theatre setting. And Circa developed in the UK many years ago and has been consistently very successful. There's been different variations made by collaborators of mine in different countries. But the way it works is it's basically a very large a substantial database, and it presents randomized contents. And this is very positive for people living with dementia and caregivers, especially family caregivers, but also formal caregivers, because they can explore it together. And nobody's in charge, and nobody knows more than anybody else. So they can just go through it as an activity, and the range and the selection prompt off conversations. And that's how it works. It's not a memory test. There's not right and wrong. It's just what it makes you think of. And often people sing along. Sometimes they get up and dance. But usually it's just a lot of reminiscing and sharing stories. And it provides a sport of conversation in situations where people can't think of things to say, or they're struggling with someone not remembering what's been saying. Having the item on the screen just finds a way around that. So
that's really fantastic, Arlene. Thank you so much. And in fact, having a member of my family in long-term care who we see daily, having something like this is really important, because you can sometimes run out of ideas. So lots of prompts are fantastic. Thank you, and we'll come back to that for sure. Bryan, I'm going to ask you to take over now and tell us a little bit about your work.
Sure. Thank you, Josephine, and thank you, AgeWell, for inviting me to speak here on the panel. It's been so fascinating to hear everyone else's work as well, so I'm glad to be able to share as well. So I guess the main crux of my research was investigating this aspect of cognition that we might start to notice changing with age, particularly our memory for our daily events in our lives. Particularly, one thing that's especially susceptible to change with aging is the unique details that make the different events in our lives unique and special. So, for example, maybe you're thinking back to the last time you went out to a restaurant or something with your loved ones. You might want to remember things like the specific restaurant that you went to, maybe the meal that you had, the people that you went with, the specific conversations that you had, and so on. And it's really these details that help make the events in our lives special and meaningful. And when we start to have their corresponding loss, it can really have an impact on one's sense of well-being. It affects how we communicate with others, our confidence in ourselves, our independence, sense of identity, and so on. just to give some backstory, when I first started graduate school, I was coming at it from more of like a basic science perspective, really trying to understand how our memory systems work, how our brain supports memory, our ability to go back in time and re-experience these events from our past. And reading all the literature and the findings, there's a lot of research showing like different contributors and factors that might help benefit memory, but there wasn't a lot that I could find in that space, taking what our current understanding of how memory works and developing these practical solutions that can help people to protect these memories for a longer period of time. So as part of that, one core aspect of my research for I guess like the last several years now, it's been centered around creating this tool called Hippocamera. So it's kind of stemming off of the idea that Arlene was touching about, trying to leverage some of the existing technology that we use quite frequently. So what we tried to do was develop this smartphone application to help people better remember the events in our lives. And here we were really trying to draw from our expertise as memory scientists to try to mimic the function of this brain structure called the hippocampus. So the hippocampus is this seahorse-shaped structure. If you put your fingers like around your temples here, about 1 inch deep, you'll have that structure, and it's really critical for supporting our ability to remember and learn. So the general premise here was to try to develop an easy to use tool as possible. So really here, we try to streamline it to only have 2 functions here. So let's say, for example, that you do have an event that you want to remember, say that time that you go out to the restaurant. What people will do is take out their device, they record a short video recording and then a verbal description of the event. And then, although it seems quite simple, what we really try to do is guide users to go through a process where they're really reflecting on the events in their lives, thinking about what makes it meaningful, and trying to encode it in this really intentional way, which has been shown to help benefit memory. Now, after recording, another critical component is to actually like study back those cues. So it's kind of like when you're in school, it's not like you just go to the lecture and just listen to the lecture. You have to also study those later on as well. So here, what we do is when you have some time in your day, you click this replay memory button here at the bottom, and it guides you to review some of those cues that you have recorded using these different memory strategies on a schedule that's designed to help optimize that memory gain. So here, what it's trying to do is combining that voice description with a speeded version of the video. And by doing this, what we're trying to do is mimic this process called hippocampal replay. So there's a lot of like neuroscience research looking at activity in the brain, and they show that one of these processes is that the hippocampus plays back essentially the patterns of activity for a memory to other parts of your brain, and it's thought to kind of underpin the strengthening of our memories over time. So a lot of my work has been trying to investigate the benefits of using a tool like this. So we had older adults use the app for 2 to 10 weeks to record and then review different events from their daily lives. And then we had them come back and actually tell us their memory for those different corresponding events. So what we found is that older adults were able to recall 50% more details for those events that were recorded with those events. And they lasted even 3 months after they stopped using the app. So it's not just like it's existing on the app itself. We also use some cool neuroimaging stuff to look at the patterns of activity in the brain, and we show enhanced activity in the hippocampus as well. So we have a paper that was just published over a year ago if you're interested in learning more as well. So currently, some of the work that we're trying to do is actually trying to make this more widely available. So stemming to Arlene's point about the implementation in a real world setting. So AgeWell has been super supportive in this. In my training there, I was able to kind of get this really multidisciplinary perspective towards developing AgeTech. So they actually helped us support a project where we worked with older adults and caregivers across Canada through their LEAP community. So it's a group of older adults and Canadians who are interested in providing feedback on technology and how to develop things like features and usability and things like that. So it's been a really cool process as well. But yeah, I'll leave this for there. I know I'm running short on time, so I'll leave room for questions there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And again, as somebody who is a care partner for an older adult in long-term care, it just seems like this type of technology is so needed. But most importantly, getting the word out, because we can have technologies there, but if people don't know about them, they don't use them. So this is now question and answer period. And I did put a quick note into the chat just to say, please, if you've got any insights that you want to share or any questions, please do so in the chat. Or if you'd like, you can always raise your hand and we'll have somebody identify you for your question orally. I'm going to kick things off here a little bit and ask a couple of questions just while you're formulating your thoughts. And I'm wondering if I can throw this open to Frank to start with. Can you talk a little bit about how technology is being used to monitor, perhaps even detect changes in cognitive health, and some observations that you might have about its sophistication and its effectiveness?
Sure. Thanks, Josephine. So as a clinician, I think about cognitive change in two ways. One is which types of cognition are changing. Is it memory? Is it language? Is it visual spatial ability? But then also, like, what is the impact on activities of daily living? So in real life, what is the impact? So all of these things can be measured using technology. So there's the simplest way is to say, the MOCA test is something many of you have heard. Right. It's a memory test. It takes about 8 minutes to do. And, it has been, a digital version exists. So, we can go from paper to a digital version. So that's sort of the simplest way of using technology to do cognitive testing. But there are probably more fun ways, which is to look at serious games. So like Arlene was talking about a little earlier, there are games that are that have components in it where you can really test different cognitive domains. So let's say words, like, so if you had a word search game, it would be a way to see how your ability to use language would be. So you could use it one time to say, how well does this person do compared to other people? But more importantly, you can also do it sequentially, right? So you can do word games once a week for a year, and the technology behind it can then monitor for changes in your ability to do language or the like. So testing a cognitive domain directly, either through a formal test or through games, I think is a very good start. More important for real life and for those of us who want to age in place, of course, is the function. So an indirect way of monitoring cognitive change would be to monitor day-to-day activities. So for instance, if you take just motions within the home, right? If I'm cognitively relatively intact, I will develop a pattern. I will, walk around the kitchen, spend so much time doing certain things, go to other rooms when I need things, and go to the basement when I need to bring up a couple of things for dinner. If I'm starting to have memory problems, I may still want to have the same dinner I did before, but now when I go downstairs, I might only bring up one or two of the 4 things that I really wanted to bring up. I'll go downstairs, I'll bring them, come back up, and then I'll go, oops, missing a couple, and then I might go back downstairs again. So now the pattern isn't I go down to the basement once to pick up the ingredients. Now I'm going back and forth more often. And we can see that in when we look at motion within a home, we can see the pattern changes as cognition changes. And then finally, I'm going to go to back to sort of what we were talking about before, which is cooking. We can also detect changes in let's say, the complexity of the meal we're making, right? So if I peel my potatoes and I, put meat in the frying pan and I prepare some vegetables and prepare a sauce, that's a good, a good meal and has some relative complexity in it. If over a year I'm starting to decrease, I'm not making vegetables anymore or not making a sauce anymore, or let's say I'm buying more frozen foods and just sticking them into the microwave, these are, again, sort of those indirect changes of activities of daily living that probably reflect a change in cognition. Obviously, other things can cause changes in preparing meals other than just cognitive issues. There could be physical limitations, there could be depression and other things. But just to say that, those would be, that's how I think about how technology, the many ways technology can help us monitor cognitive change.
That's really fascinating. So rather than having this episodic clinician applied test like the MOCA, when somebody is concerned, the use of technology just to ubiquitously test over time and to pick up some of those nuances and allowing that information to be used to help sort of fine tune that even minor changes might be the way this technology is going. That's fantastic, really fantastic. Thank you for that, Frank. We have a question for Arlene from Annette Berndt. She asks, how do you encourage sustainability of the activity? For example, your Xbox bowling in long-term care homes with competing demands for care aides time.
Yeah.
And will these activities drop off over time?
It's a great question, and it's one of the things that I think is part of the bigger picture that we have to address. We can have brilliant solutions, we can have great things, but if they can't be not just implemented but maintained, that is a challenge. Our experience has been, like with any of innovations in care settings, you do need infrastructure, you need support from the top, you need buy-in, and it has to be embedded into routines, and it can't just be the responsibility of one person, because if they leave or they're off sick or it's not their day, they're not working, things don't happen, and that's across the board. So really it has to be part of the culture, so it's seen as one of the things that they do. And for us with the gaming, I mean, it is great fun and anybody can join in, because we try to make things that are as accessible as possible. I think having some more evidence about how it can be beneficial could also strengthen those arguments. But yeah, it is a challenge in long-term care. It's a challenge with everything. But we have found some strategies. If we get the managers seeing this as important, and time is built in or it's included into the schedule, that seems to be a key thing. And then it doesn't matter which members of staff are there, because they can still lead the groups.
That's really fascinating, Arlene. And as you were talking, I was thinking, while residents and staff may come and go, oftentimes they have volunteers in the home who have real longevity. So thinking as well about how volunteers in the home might be able to be incorporated in might be another way of improving accessibility. So thank you. A great response to that question. I wonder if I could throw it open to Jay as well. Jay, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you see as some of the biggest challenges to making technologies more available to people like yourself or others who perhaps don't have the same kind of technological sort of know-how as you do. I wonder if you have some thoughts on that.
I think you mentioned it earlier. There's probably a lot of technology out there that people aren't aware of. I think the key, as far as availability, first of all, it's got to be something that is easy to navigate. I know that I have tried different technologies. I've been asked to sit on different panels, and sometimes it doesn't seem like it's well thought out, or they're getting the input from the person living with the disease, which is very frustrating. I have found websites that are extremely difficult to navigate, but when we've been asked to provide input, they give us other options. I think the important thing is to get people involved in those early stages of development. and actually reach out to people, living with the disease to make sure that it is something that not only is going to be accessible, but easy to navigate. And I think oftentimes people want to take the shortcut and move very quickly. It takes longer if you're getting that input from folks, but the value added is huge. So again, just keep talking to those folks in the community and get as much input as you can to make sure that it's going to be used by a larger group of individuals. Can't always find the words to say, but hopefully that makes
You were very articulate. Thank you. And that was a terrific response. I'm wondering if I can throw this open to Bryan. Bryan, there's a question we have from Sarah Agvami who asks, do programmable technology solutions that are non-interactive, so for instance, programmable smart lights, are they beneficial in relation to cognitive change, do you think? Are they counterproductive given, the change in person's routines? So I wonder do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't have a lot of expertise in kind of like the smart home, kind of like hardware and like lights and stuff like that, but I know that the built and physical environment can have a huge impact on our cognition, as though everyone's work has been showing. So I imagine that there is some role in in affecting people's routine, but I don't think I can speak specifically to anything that I know about in terms of like routine and schedule in particular.
Thanks, Bryan.
Yeah.
Arlene, you had something to add.
Yeah, and I think it's a fascinating question. And there is a little bit of research from some of the early smart homes, and Frank might know of more, but the ones that I know of, there was a very early smart home in the UK, like in the very early 2000s. And one of they had a person living there for a year, a gentleman with quite moderate dementia, and they found lighting at night when he got up to go to the bathroom very successfully led him back to bed rather than going downstairs, and his incontinence was completely gone through this project because he was going back to bed. His sleep increased, it like doubled. It's an absolutely amazing impact. So in that case, I mean, that was one of the things that some were high tech, some were low tech, but it was just the lighting seemed very important because it just navigated him back. So that's one example. And also I visited some demonstration apartments in Sweden probably about 10 years ago, and they had it was a company had fitted them out, and they were doing bespoke packages, and they would have some automated things like maybe someone's medication was put by the coffee machine, and if the coffee machine wasn't switched on by a certain time, they would get a reminder, and if they still didn't respond, then the family member would get a text message and so on. And so they were a bit like Frank was saying, attaching things to the devices to provide prompts and so on. And I think it's quite, in some ways, it's great that we've got these examples, but some of these are 10 and 20 years old, and we still don't have them in widespread use. And I think it's a whole other issue, but the very slow scaling is a big challenge in this field.
Yes, yeah, that's so true. And Frank, you had something you wanted to add as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, I think what we've proven is that individual technologies can help individual problems, right? So if you have difficulty finding a way to the bathroom at night, there is lighting technology that can help you. If you have congestive heart failure, weight monitoring technology can help you. And if it automatically goes back to the doctor's office, and then they can change your pills and your diet before bad things happen, for sure. So there's definitely evidence that these individual technologies make a difference. I think where we have to be careful and where we don't have a lot of experience yet is what I call the GPS-ification of smart homes. So, my daughters rely on their GPS to drive down the street. When I ask them, visualize going down Woodruff and then the ramp onto the Queensway, they're going, what are you talking about, right? Because GPS They do not need to know any streets. They do not need to visualize what the city looks like anymore. So I think GPS has actually hurt their visual spatial ability of the city. I feel that if we, if we fully automate, if we have, Alexa or Google or whoever run the home, we risk losing some of our abilities. So what we're trying to do is to say, no, you do your activities, you do you. We'll monitor them. We'll get a pattern of who you are. And just to answer Jim's excellent question, which is there only one way to boil potatoes? Of course not, right? You may get your water out of the fridge. You might buy your water somewhere. You might have it in a different container. So, it was just an example, but for sure we need, and the smartest technology really learns your patterns first and then looks for a break in the pattern and then go, hey, did you want to, right? Sort of, which is a support and not a do this, then do this, then do this, because then we won't be using our hippocampus as much. And then just to answer the second part of Jim's question, if the technology is smart enough, it will know if there's water in the pot. So if you remember the picture that we had, water being in the pot, the temperature will gradually increase for the whole pot. Whereas if there's potatoes at the bottom of the pot with no water, we can actually see those cold potatoes while the pot is heating. So there's going to be checks and balances in the system, but it was an excellent question. Obviously, I tried to simplify things. The real systems are going to be much more complex.
So your point is well taken, Frank, that in fact what we're looking for is supportive technology, not directive technology. So not prescriptive, but actually helping people still have that kind of visual spatial conceptualization of their home or a city or whatever, because it's useful. I mean, really important heuristics for us in our daily living. I'm just looking at the time. We have a lot of comments and questions in the chat. I do want to just say to Frog, I think is Stuart, how does AgeWell consider accessibility to technology for a broader community? We have many projects that are ongoing that are looking at rural and remote, and also some projects that are looking at low SES, sometimes in some cases, those who are living in precarious housing situations. So there are many projects. We haven't been able to highlight them obviously today, but there are many that are ongoing. So with that, I think, unfortunately, we have no more time. I really want to thank our panel, and I hope everybody can show their appreciation to the panel with some clapping hands. What a terrific set of presentations we've had today. Don't forget, we have been recording this, and we will post this webinar to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to share it with a friend. With that, I will wish everybody, again, to our panel, thank you so much for all your insights. Thank you to everybody for coming today. And we hope to see you at the next AgeWell webinar. Thanks again, and bye-bye.